Hello, AP students. This is Mrs. Politsky, and I have your notes for Chapter 10, Personality, Part 3, Dehumanistic Theory. So, as we go along, make sure that you are getting your notes. So, let's begin. We're going to talk a little bit about what the humanistic theory is all about. And this is a little different than maybe our psychoanalytic or psychodynamic theory, in that the humanistic theory, for the most part, are theories that are optimistic about the core of human nature. In other words, for a humanist, personality is driven by the needs to adapt, learn, grow, and excel. They retain the idea of motivation as the central component to personality. So, in other words, it's not so much maybe the unconscious desires that we might have as it is this notion about trying to make the best out of yourself, trying to raise your self esteem and to become a better person. Mental disorders are seen as stemming from unhealthy situations that might cause low self esteem and unmet needs. Humanists also emphasize the positive in human nature. So, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the big guys. We're going to talk about Gordon Allport, Abraham Maslow, and Carl Rogers, just to name a few. And if you take a look below, there's this little pyramid that's on the bottom of your screen. This would be Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which you probably have learned a little bit about maybe in some other classes. This is one of those theories that kind of comes out of the humanistic model. So let's start with Allport. He developed one of the first complete theories in humanistic psychology. The trait theory, for the most part, assumes that individuals possess three types of traits the stable, for stable personality. So these are characteristics that are presumed to exist within individuals and to guide their thoughts and actions. And so they are known as the central traits, which are basically things like the basis of your personality. Like, are you a happy person, a sad person, a moody person? There is also the secondary traits, which would be basically your preferences or attitudes. And finally, the cardinal traits. This kind of defines your life, and very few individuals have cardinal traits. This would be things like greed or sadism or such. Okay. Abraham Maslow also had some theories on humanistic psychology, and he basically referred to the humanistic view as psychology's third force compared to the psychoanalytic or psychodynamic model and the behavioralist model. Okay, Maslow argued that we need a theory to describe mental health as something more than just the absence of illness, and the fact that we have theoretical needs that become kind of our life's quest. So when you talk about his hierarchy of needs, which we were looking at just a moment ago with that pyramid, at the very, very top of Maslow's theory is this idea of self-actualization. This is the idea that healthy individuals have met all their basic needs and are free to create and fulfill all their potentials. His theory of the hierarchy of needs also offers an explanation of maladjustment, a long unfulfilled deficiency or need, such as a need for love or esteem, can produce some kind of maladjustment, while freedom from such needs allows a person to pursue their interests that promote growth and fulfillment. People who are self accepting lead happier lives, according to Maslow. Carl Rogers is also another humanistic theorist, and Rogers was a therapist who often worked with dysfunctional people rather than those people who were self actualized, according to Maslow. And he basically came up with this idea of the fully functioning person. And this was his term for a healthy, self actualized individual who has a self concept that is both positive and congruent to reality. In other words, they're in touch with reality. Roger insisted that psychology recognize the reality of perception and feelings that he called the phenomenal fields. And the phenomenal fields is our psychological reality. It's composed of one's perceptions and feelings. And this is going to vary from person to person, but this might be why a student's reaction to a grade depends entirely on the student's perception. Um, Rogers also believed that everyone has the capacity for growth in a supportive and nurturing environment. Roger concluded that children from homes where parental love is unconditional, meaning dependent on good behavior, may grow up with anxiety and a strong sense of guilt that leads to low self esteem and mental disorder. Instead of guilt mongering, people need to give unconditional positive regard, or basically unconditional love. This is love without conditions attached. So, looking at know, Rogers' theory may be a little bit broken down. Basic human needs: a need for self-actualization, a need for positive regards, the responses of other people, unconditional positive regard, and conditional positive regard. And the results basically is if you have unconditional positive regard, you're going to have self-actualization. Whereas conditional positive regard, you're going to have some self-discrepancies and people are going to struggle. So, evaluating the humanistic model, when you talk about experimental psychologists, they contended that there's too many concepts in humanistic psychology that defy objective testing. In other words, very similar to the psychodynamic theory, it's really hard to test. The psychoanalytic theorists criticized the humanistic psychologists for their emphasis on present conscious experience, arguing that the humanistic approach doesn't recognize the power of the unconscious mind. You can also throw in the cross-cultural psychologists who have criticized the humanist because of their emphasis on self-esteem or self-concept or self-actualization. The fact that you're not looking at the communal side of things. And one movement that's kind of come out of the humanistic model is this idea of positive psychology. It focuses on desirable aspects of human functioning as opposed to any kind of psychopathology, which would be the study of like psychiatric diseases. So positive psychologists are more concerned with the scientific foundations of their theory opposed to maybe what the humanists were looking at. So breaking it down, this is kind of a little bit about how you would break down positive psychology. The whole idea is that it kind of has the same goals, again, as the humanistic model, except for there's a little more science to it. So thank you very much.